Okay, first of all, I want to say that if anyone is here for my Blaze Blue stuff, I'm working on it. Don't worry, I'm probably going to record for that right after. But for everyone else, hello there. I'm Razzle48, and the Imaginarium Theater nonsense reset today, so I knew exactly what I had to do. I bum rushed through that to get my next key for my next Envisaged Echo, which, not a problem at all. I personally found Imaginarium Theater to be way easier this time than it was the first time, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking about Jean today, and for any of you at home who might be struggling with this, I have good news for you. This is significantly easier than Diluc's. I was expecting to have to spend way more time working on this than I actually ended up doing. This is easier than Diluc's for a few reasons, and in fact, I wasn't even expecting to accomplish this on the run that I did. I was actually still just experimenting. There's a few reasons why I was able to finish a run before I was as familiar with it, like as I was with Diluc's. And so you'll see that my in-game strats are like absolute garbage. I play absolutely trash in this run, but it does not matter. Everything about this challenge is in the setup, and we're gonna talk about that when we get to it, but I am of course going to show you the run and talk about how you can improve your gameplay if you're struggling on any given part of this challenge. This is basically what the challenge is. There is no time limit on this challenge, unlike the Diluc one, thank God. Instead, it's sort of a soft time limit where Jean will continuously take damage, and you basically have to keep her alive until you can kill all the mobs. We're gonna talk about that as we go a little. So, the first two mobs are going to spawn over here on the left side of the room, and the game gives you like positions for you to use Jean's elemental skill in order to push the mobs up on both the north and west sides of the room. This is how you're going to be killing everyone. Having a good weapon does not at all matter here. You do not need damage. In fact, we're going to talk about this more once we get to the artifacts and the setup for this run, but the only thing that matters is energy recharge, and I'll elaborate on that a little bit. But as far as actually starting the challenge goes, you're basically supposed to protect this cargo right here. Doesn't have a whole lot of health, but doesn't matter for reasons we'll get to in a second. So these two guys are going to spawn right here, easy peasy. You just hold down your elemental skill, push them off the map, get yourself some energy recharge particles. And then 3 dudes are going to spawn here. 2 on the right side of the room and 1 on the north side. I always address the enemies in this challenge who are on a side of the room that does not correlate to a hole in the wall first. So the first thing that you want to do here, you want to push the mobs who are on the side of the room that does not have a wall over to the side of the room that does have a hole in the wall. You'll notice that while I was still waiting for my elemental skill to recharge here, I hit them with some normal attacks. This is not for damage. This is because Jean's normal attacks have a 50% chance to restore some health for you, and I know that is on this phase when these 3 enemies spawn that you start to take continuous pyro damage for no reason. So as soon as you get your elemental skill back, this is one of those challenges where you want to be using your skill and burst as soon as you get them, and basically everything about this challenge is getting your first elemental burst. Once you've gotten your first elemental burst, you've pretty much completed the run. So as soon as I get my elemental skill back, I try to push both of these guys over to that guy. As you can see, I only got one of them because I was bad. You should be able to get both of them relatively easily. Again, while you're waiting for your skill and your burst to recharge, you want to hit them with some normal attacks in order to recharge your health. And it is about at this point in time where you will start accumulating the fire damage. So a couple of things here. The first thing is that on the off chance that the cargo is getting its ass beat, you can use Jean's charge attack, which basically is an upwards uppercut and will keep them floating in the air for a moment so that you can do what you need to do without really having to worry about this cargo. It also doesn't really interfere with your elemental skill when you get it recharged so that you can push the enemies as needed. But as far as I could tell, I never had a problem with this cargo. It was all about just staying alive. And you might be wondering, wow, you have 46,000 health. health. Like, you must have crazy HP artifacts. How could you expect me to do that with my poo-poo artifacts that I have access to? Point one, this fire damage does not actually count as fire damage. Meaning, my first thought when I read this challenge was to use the Lava Walker artifact set to reduce the fire damage that I'd be taking in this challenge. This does not work. It does not count as pyro damage as far as the Lava Walker set is concerned, so do not try that. The second thing is that the damage you will be taking during each instance of this pyro damage is set. See, I took this is what the cargo just took. I took 4617 HP here, and you'll notice that the next time I take damage, I take the exact same amount, 4617. You wait a little while more, exact same amount, 4617. So, the pyro damage scales with your HP. It is exactly 10% of my max health. This is actually something that I was experimenting here in this run, is half my artifacts were dedicated to HP. This is not optimal. Having more HP does not help you at all, because every instance of pyro damage will take away 1/10 of your HP. Which goes back to what I was talking about earlier, how the most, in fact, the only important stat in this challenge is energy recharge, so that you can get your ult up and begin healing yourself. So I was just hitting this guy with normal attacks while I was waiting to use these two abilities again to try to get some of my health back. It's based on Jean's attack, so you could say that, like, depending on what you do, attack might be a stat you should consider, but anytime you could be putting anything into attack as far as your build is concerned, you should be putting it into energy recharge for this challenge instead. So I was basically just trying to group these guys up here. I stepped in fire because I am a dumbass, and I am basically just trying to keep all of these people grouped up here, and as soon as I get my ult, I use it. The ult is very important, not only because it heals you, but it also cleanses the fire. Because you are in the realm of the elemental burst, it is going to cleanse the fire, and you will also continuously restore HP as long as you're in here. So not only do you want to ult as soon as possible, any given time that you can, but you also want to remain within the field the entire time it is up, and this is why it is so important to group up the mobs together so that you can do everything that you need to do with them while remaining within the Dandelion field. So I'm going to keep trying to push these guys off with no success because I am garbage at this game. I even try to hit them off with my attack strings. I am still unable to. Again, this isn't a difficult challenge as long as you stay within your ult. Once you get that first ult, as you can see, it's just a matter of waiting to get the next one, and because it cleanses the fire, you shouldn't have to worry about dying again, which means that even though I am clearly bad at taking these guys out with Jean, I'm still able to do it with no risk of dying. These are just treasure hoarders, so the chance of them actually doing any damage of any significance to you themselves is relatively low. The next enemies are going to be these two guys that spawn on the east side of the room. This is actually the first time that I got past the first 5 enemies, and that's all that matters, because once you get your burst in rotation, you don't have to worry about anything else. You just take out the guys where you can. You should be getting your energy recharge back because Jean's elemental skill gives you so many particles back per use. Also, even though they're dying from fall damage, falling off the map, they will still give you elemental particles when they end up dying. So as long as you put your artifacts and your weapon are all something geared towards energy recharge, you should be fine. We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. The next wave of enemies are going to be probably the most difficult ones, because it's going to be 2 batches of enemies, 1 dude south, 1 dude east, and all of these enemies are not on the same side of the room as any of the holes in the wall, but once again, it's not really a problem. This was my first time seeing these enemies, so I just tried to, push this guy up. I figured it would be easier to push one guy up than 2 guys over here. I guess I would probably say that this is correct. As you can see, I'm bad and can't really get this guy off of the thing in the center, but it doesn't really matter, because once you hit an enemy in this challenge, they are, for the most part, going to stop. As you can see with this guy over here. Where is my mouse cursor? As you can see with this guy over here, this is the guy who at the south side of the room that I hit. As soon as you hit an enemy in this challenge, they will direct their attacks away from the cargo in the center. So it's like I said earlier, you don't really have to worry about this cargo dying. It's not going to die even if you play badly. So you can group these guys up at your leisure. Again, as soon, like any time that both of these abilities are on cooldown, just use normal attacks in order to get little bits of your HP back. And then you basically use the hold version of your skill down to try to group them up. My Jean is at Constellation 4, so it is easier for me to group people up than it would be for her at C0. I think that her first constellation is the only one that matters in the slightest. Even if you have her at C0, it still shouldn't be too hard. It's not really about trying to group these guys up and get rid of them as fast as possible. It all, again, goes back to having your ult when you need it so you do not die. And because I'm feeling a little cocky, I didn't proc this immediately. I wanted to wait for the guys to spawn so that I can go forwards towards them and use my ult and start addressing them while getting some healing back at the same time. Once again, an instance of me being bad, not able to catch both of the enemies with a single use of my elemental skill because this was still one of my earlier, more experimental runs, and this is an example of me using her charge attack to keep this guy occupied just while I was waiting for my elemental skill to recharge. Doesn't really matter, once again, but the last wave of enemies are these 3 dudes at the south. This is honestly a very easy wave for obvious reasons. Because they're all inherently grouped up together, you will be able to use your elemental skill to group them up and just get rid of them all in one fell swoop relatively easily. Like this guy down here just didn't want to fall for a moment. But even so, it didn't end up being a problem. Even though I played really bad, even though a lot of enemies got a lot of hits on the target in the center, it still had over 30% of its health remaining. So let's look at the run again from start to finish. Like I said, unlike my Diluc run, which I was really proud of, this run was really bad. It is ultimately just a matter of getting your energy recharge up as high as you possibly can, because the only difficult part of this challenge is the beginning and making sure that you get as many elemental particles as possible to get that initial ult. And you see, you try to get those two grouped up together with your elemental skill if you're at all able to. I even took some damage there from that guy punching me, and I was basically stepping on the fire that this guy threw. Not sure how much that really did, seeing as I was already affected by Pyro, but as you can see, as soon as I get the first elemental burst off, despite my inability to take care of these guys swiftly, it just ceases to be a problem. The health of the thing in the center doesn't really matter. As soon as you get these guys in a single Gera Blade, they will stop paying attention to the target and will try to beat your ass. But once you get that first ult in rotation, it no longer should be causing you any problems. Just stay in it as long as possible. As you can see there, I stayed in it so that when the fire came back, it was immediately cleansed. If I was a bit better at this game, this part would go even faster because I would have gotten that guy there probably a few attack strings sooner. But, like I said, doesn't really matter. This is more of a case of a challenge where you have to find a good build than actually play well. Thankfully, they did get rid of the obnoxious time limit, again, that they had on the Diluc one. That was the reason that challenge was so much trouble. Ideally, you would get both enemies there, but doesn't really matter because there is no time limit. I'm able to just take full advantage of my Dandelion field. And perhaps, if any of you might be struggling with, any aspect of this challenge, you might want to just not kill the enemies as fast because there is no time limit. And instead, just take advantage of being in the Dandelion field as long as you possibly can when there is only one enemy there, so that you aren't affected by the fire and can get as much healing out of it as possible, because that's ultimately what matters. Getting as much healing as you possibly can, getting every instance of healing per game tick that you can out of the Dandelion field. That's actually RuneScape terminology. Don't know if it's really applicable for Genshin Impact, but that's all there is to it. Let's talk about the important stuff. Let's talk about the build. So, for the weapon, I used a Favonius sword. I have had horrible luck with Favonius weapons. Even though I've played this game since day one, I only have a Favonius sword that is refinement rank 3, and it is only level 80, not even max ascension, not even max refine. But the important thing is that it has a main stat. Oh, don't want to move that around. The important thing is that it has a main stat here of energy recharge, so that you are able to get that initial ult as soon as possible early on in the challenge. Then you can start accumulating ult charge while you're in that Dandelion field to keep them in rotation, and you won't have to spend nearly as much time outside of them as you do from the beginning of the challenge to the time when you do your first ult. Most of you will probably have a Favonius sword refinement rank 5, or even one with max level. That's good. Higher level it is, the more energy recharge it'll have. So let's talk about the artifacts, because this is the most important part, and I don't feel like anyone who's been playing this game to the point where they can have a level 90 gene will even have a problem getting artifacts that they will need for this challenge. I do think that my artifacts are a little more optimized than they were with Diluc, but also not, right? Because the only thing that matters is energy recharge. And I was actually testing during this run, testing HP and energy recharge, but like I told you, because the fire damage is the only damage you really have to worry about, and because that will always be 10% of your HP, how much HP you have does not matter, and because the fire damage is not counted as pyro damage, and it will always be 10% of your HP, the Lava Walker set will not help either. So I was basically just running a 2-piece set, because this stat, this bonus, did not matter at all. To better optimize this artifact set, for example, if one of you has even worse luck than me, and you cannot get a Favonius sword to level 80, or if you cannot get one to even so much as refinement 3, I think that an ideal thing that you could do is replace this second set with something that boosts attack, so that way that those basic attacks that you're using at the beginning of the challenge leading up to that first ult will heal you more and hopefully get you to that first elemental burst. Or you could potentially try out healing bonus set together with Emblem of Severed Fate. Like I said, the main stats don't really matter. Like, the stats don't really matter too much. The only thing you basically need to find are like artifacts that have energy recharge. Nothing else matters. The sub-stats were even energy recharge. Like my sands, my cup, they were both HP, because that's what I was trying out. Like, all 3 of my artifacts were all HP based, and none of this mattered. If you use artifacts that have energy recharge as the main stat, this shouldn't pose a problem to you whatsoever. I did say that my gene was C4, but this doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that Gale Blade increases the pulling speed from C1, so that I am able to group people up faster, but ultimately that doesn't really matter, because the only thing that really matters is how much energy recharge you get from it. So even if you do not group people up, as you saw in the challenge, there was a lot of times where I did not even group people up properly, even with C1, as long as you are still using it as much as you can in order to get all of your elemental particles, you should be fine. The movement speed and attack speed didn't really matter. You could debate that this matters a little if you go in more so on the healing bonus for those normal attacks to try to get a little more healing during that first phase. But as you saw, all of my artifacts were geared towards HP, so I didn't even really maximize my utilization of it in order to get a successful run with minimal experience. As long as you get your ult, then even if it doesn't necessarily have a high level like mine, I think that mine was like level 9, and then I had the boost from the constellation, then as long as you're getting the healing, it's cleaning the fire, which is the important thing. Just stay in there as long as possible and hit the enemies to rack up energy recharge so that you can do it again as soon as the cooldown is gone. C4 obviously doesn't matter whatsoever, because we are not killing people with Animo, we're not killing people with normal attack damage or anything like that. These are my skills. Like I said, they don't matter because damage does not matter in this challenge. This is probably the only one that matters because of how much healing you get. But even then, that is a moot point, because generally speaking, as long as you get that first ult, you should be Gucci. And that will do it for my gene guide. As you could have probably seen in the video, I don't even think that I'm really all that great of a Genshin Impact player. My performance, despite the fact that I was still learning the challenge, was kind of trash. But it seemed that you all really seemed to enjoy my Diluc tutorial, and that really helped a lot of you. And I'm really glad that I was able to do something like that. So hopefully this one was able to be equally helpful. Like I said, don't consider myself a really good Genshin player, but I do everything in the game. So if any of you are having trouble with anything else, feel free to tell me about it in the comments, and I might make a video about it. Until then, this is Razzle48 saying goodbye, and unfortunately, I won't be able to make another one of these for a while because it's going to take another 2 Imaginarium Theater seasons for me to get enough keys to do another one, but I will as soon as possible. Unless we get more of these, my next one is probably going to be Chi-Chi. So, until then, this is Razzle48 saying goodbye, and I will see you next time.